Hi there, welcome to Outdoors and Country Living. I'm Leanne. Today in this video we're going to be harvesting and dehydrating fresh sweet basil. This is something that we grow every year here on our homestead. So to properly harvest your basil, you want to find a joint where two shoots are coming out, and we're going to clip it right above that area. I'm using scissors. You can see the 2 points on the left and the right. And then we're taking that middle section. I'll show you again here. You can see on the left and the right the two shoots coming out, and I'm clipping off the top portion again. Harvesting your basil like this allows for bushy growth instead of tall growth. You don't want your basil to get tall and seed out, because then the life of your basil plants is going to shorten. By pruning your basil like this, it allows for the plants to get fatter or wider instead of tall and skinny. And you're going to get a much higher yield off of your plants. You can see the little growth of leaves there on the left and the right. So I'm pruning it just above that. There was a point in time when I first started raising and growing our own basil where I thought you just came out and pulled the leaves off. Well, that's wrong. Your plants will die in no time if you do that. Our basil was a little splotchy this year coming up, but I still have a good amount that I'm able to harvest and dehydrate and save for future use. So I like to simply dehydrate our basil, crush it with my hands, and I use mason jars with lids to save it in. One thing with basil, you have to regularly come out and harvest it, because once you start pruning it like this, the growth is tremendous. This one I'm going to take down a little bit lower because it's getting a little too tall, but I still have growth points on the left and the right where I snipped it. Fresh basil is wonderful in tomato soup, on potatoes, in all kinds of soups, any way you like to use it. You can see the new growth there. You could use garden shears, but I find scissors are just as easy. They get the job done. You can see here this is starting to seed out. Looks like it's going to develop a flower on the top. We don't want that. So I'm going to snip that off. And we can still use the leaves that are on that piece that I snipped. But you don't want it to flower out, because then the life of it is shortened. Now that I have a good harvest here, let's take it inside and I'll show you how I dehydrate it. So in the bowl is the basil leaves. They are clean. I am not going to wash these leaves. I suppose if yours are muddy or dirty, you could, but I typically never wash my basil. There's no chemicals on it, so I'm not afraid of that. We're simply just going to start pulling the leaves off of the stalks. And you can do it one by one, as I'm showing you here, which is quite tedious. It takes a little bit of time. I suppose if you don't have a large harvest like this, you could take your time and do it. But I'll also show you here in a minute another way that I do it. But we don't want to dehydrate the stem or the stalk that we trimmed off just because it's really tough and not very palatable. And it doesn't crush very well. So here is typically how I get the leaves off. Just pinch off the big cluster and toss it in your bowl. Some of them will stay together, but that's not a big deal. Once they're dehydrated and crunchy, it doesn't matter. That's easier, isn't it? Alright, I've got them all off of the stems. So now we'll go to the dehydrator. Again, I'm not washing it because we don't use chemical sprays here on our garden produce or herbs. So let's start feeding this into the dehydrator. I set our dehydrators up in our basement just so they're not hogging up countertop space upstairs, because with canning and everything else going on, I need all of the space I can get. So I don't worry about overlapping leaves on here. They're going to dry out and be just fine. I guess I'm not that anal. And you don't need to be either. Just spread them out. Once you get it all in there, put your lid on. Herbs typically dry around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. You can dry them a little bit hotter to speed up the process, but typically 95 to 100 degrees is about right. These will dry for about 24 hours or until everything is dry and crunchy. We'll come back to it tomorrow. Alright, it's the next day. I'm just testing it. Yep, they are dry and crunchy. You just want to make sure there's no moisture left on your basil leaves. And I just put them into another bowl. So once I get it all in there, then I can just crunch it up with my hands. You will see here in a minute or so that it really does take a lot of basil leaves to even get a decent amount to put away. But every bit counts. This is one of our favorite herbs to use and cook with, and it adds tremendous amount of flavor to certain dishes. We put it in almost everything. Just crunch it up with your hands. You could use a spice grinder or coffee grinder, but why? Your hands work just as well, and you don't have to dirty anything else up. It's that easy to make your own dried basil, or any herb for that matter. So I've got it put in this quart mason jar. My goal is to eventually get this filled up. And I just use a screw-on like storage lid on the top. And that way it'll just sit in your pantry forever and ever until you use it all up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care.